afternoon. We are going to call our March Finance Meeting Committee to order. But before we get started, I will entertain a motion to approve the April 29th meeting minutes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I would move adoption of the previous meeting's minutes.
So we have a motion by Chair Haggerty,
Second.
second from Ms. Gordon. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The minutes have been passed. So before I kick it over to Mr. Nieder, we felt it was important to kind of provide some next steps and to clear up some of the mishaps that is still centered around this budget. And so this may be redundant information for some of us sitting at the table, but to the public, we thought it would be important to share what is in the board's now proposed budget versus the superintendent's proposed budget. And with our proposed budget that has now gone over to the county commissioners, as they're doing their deliberations on it, we just want to get ahead and clear up some of the narratives that is around us. So Mr. Nieder, I will kick it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chair Swanson. And Mr. Swanson did a very nice job sort of setting the stage and covering my intro slide at the same time, which is what we'd like to cover today. Just a brief review of the process the board's gone through thus far. We're calling it Fact or Fiction, clarifications on the proposed budget, an update on the Wake County budget, and then an update on the state of North Carolina budget. Since we last met, the House has now come out with their proposal, so we'll give an update on that, and then we'll talk about next steps. So we'll start looking backwards. The board formally started on this process back in March 18th. The board formally heard the superintendent's proposed budget during your board meeting. And then a week later, at the Finance Committee on March 25th, the board received additional details on the proposed budget restructuring or budget reductions that were included in next year's proposed budget. And again, I'll remind the board and the public, it's the first time we've included in a proposed budget reductions in a number of years. In fact, I would say probably going back to the Great Recession, not even the pandemic, do I recall coming to the board with that. Board held a work session on April 8th. The board held a formal public hearing on the evening of the 8th at your board meeting. Then the board also, as I've said before, did something new this year, held 3 regional public input sessions across the county. So individuals that might not have been able to come here on April 8th were able to speak and give input and feedback to the board on the proposed budget across the county. Another work session on the 22nd, another work session on the 29th, and then a week later, the board, after much discussion and direction and some changes to the superintendent's budget, approved the board's approved budget again with a handful of changes on May 6th. Subsequent to that, it went to the county commissioners as you're required to statutory review by May 15th. Then the next date I will throw out on the list, May 22nd, this past Thursday. The board chair, vice chair, superintendent, and some staff were at the Board of Commissioners meeting. They held a budget work session on their budget, but during that work session, they had some questions about the Board of Education's budget. So those individuals I just mentioned were there to both present and answer any questions the commissioners had. So now, kind of our fact or fiction. I think 3 or 4 slides just to, again, clarify for the public, for the board, what is and what isn't. Number of proposals were included in the budget for budget reductions. The basis for those was the needs for additional new funding next year were greater than the forecast revenue growth for the county and for the likely increase in any county appropriation. So as a result of that forecast revenue on the part of the county, and availability of increase for county appropriation compared to our needs and the key needs for additional local funding for this coming year coming from 2 or 3 areas. One, the opening of 4 new schools, all in the same year, being a big one. Legislative requirements including our forecast or estimated legislative salary increases, benefit rate increases, as well as increased revenues. Although they come into Wake County and they're part of our budget, they're really not accessible by Wake County to support the district, but rather they're pass-through funds in our budget that go directly onto the charter. So those were some of the highlights driving the increases, and ultimately what led to the reductions, those increases being in the amount of about $60 million. And the superintendent and then the board budget, both including a $40.3 million increase in funding to the county. So now to take just a couple more minutes and hopefully share what is fact and what is not. So the budget eliminates dental insurance coverage for staff. That's false. That is not true. The superintendent's budget did not include that. The board's proposed budget did not include that. There's never been a proposal to eliminate staff dental insurance. What was in the initial proposed budget was a proposed change maintaining the dental insurance coverage but shifting responsibility for the premiums. That was it. The board, through its discussion, through its number of work sessions as well as public feedback, gave direction back to the superintendent and staff to remove that proposed change of responsibility for premium shift. And so the board's proposed budget makes no changes. So it was never eliminated, and the board has basically removed any shifting of premium responsibility from employee to employer. So what is currently proposed for the county, there is no change. An employee's $6 a month premium for self-dental insurance coverage would continue as is. So next, the budget reduces the number of staffing resources in our classrooms. Fact or fiction? Fiction. The superintendent's budget made no changes to staffing in the classrooms. No formula changes were made whatsoever, and that includes at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. The budget proposal will eliminate jobs for Wake County Public School System staff. Fact or fiction? Fiction. Budget proposal does include a reduction of up to approximately 50% positions across the district. Some of those positions are in central office. Some are in the schools. Our plans from the very beginning and continue to be that we will achieve this through the elimination of vacant positions and of placing any staff that are currently in a position into another position that they are licensed for if they are licensed individuals, or they are prepared and have the capacities, if not licensure, other skill sets that are required to work in. And thus far, as far as any remaining placements, I believe, Dr. Matillo, you shared that we've got all but 1 or 2 or a handful or less of individuals placed. So again, for context, there's no plan to eliminate any jobs for staff, and these 50 or so positions between the vacant positions and shifting people is in the context of 20,000 full-time staff.
And Mr. Leader, I know this particular piece came up in the budget work session with the commissioners, and they were very concerned to make sure that, you know, any person that were displaced had position. I think Dr. Mutillo had stated at that meeting that it was one person or none that we had to
There we were talking about a particular category. I don't remember if it was counselors or somebody, but
The
we
digital learning coordinators.
the DLCs there, yeah. So we were able to find positions for all of the DLC coordinators. And then for the different employee groups, we do have some that we still need to place, but we'll continue to work on those. In addition, we always have displacements at the end of the year based on students. So it's not to say that we only have a few total displacements left. We are still working through the displaced employees based on student enrollment and things for a variety of reasons.
And I'll pause right here to see if there's any questions or comments. Okay. Here or none, we can.
Okay. So next, fact or fiction. The budget proposal will impact our core business of learning and teaching. I wish I could say this was fiction, but I do not believe that is the case. This is a fact. Any material resource reductions in an environment where resources are already constrained will have some level of impact. And the reason I say constrained resources and bringing back the map that was shared with this board at the retreat back in December, I'm not going to go through the map, but it shows funding levels on average for each state. And as recently as studies that have come out the last month, maybe 2 months, in terms of per pupil funding, North Carolina, depending on what study you're looking at, continues to rank 48th, 49th out of 100 states in this country as being at the bottom. So 94% of our operating budget goes to our schools and for student transportation, child nutrition, and maintenance of the buildings. The other 6% goes to our central operations. We were thoughtful in mitigating the impact on the direct classroom because 38% of the proposed reductions came out of 6% of the operating budget. But that said, whether it's a direct impact or an indirect impact, it will have the impact. One of the examples I believe I've shared in the past, I'm not sure if it's been with the board, perhaps with one of the BACs, in my own area in purchasing, we've had a reduction in contracted services. One of the things we will likely do, if nothing changes, is reduce the frequency of distribution of supplies from our warehouse to schools. So does that impact the classroom? Indirectly, yes, and others like that. So that's it on that little section of fact or fiction. An update on the Wake County budget. The county manager, David Ellis, presented his budget to the commissioners the day before the board approved its proposed budget on May 5th. His proposal included a $35 million increase in funding to the school system, and the board's proposed budget was $40.3 million, so there's a delta there. The county is holding public hearings and budget work sessions, including the one I mentioned that they conducted this past Thursday, which the board chair, vice chair, and staff attended. The superintendent staff, well, just cover that. The commissioners, as a recent rule, have approved their proposed or their budget by the first June meeting. They're required by statute to have it in place by the end of June. So again, I'd like to think, I know we'll have it by the end of June, and I'd like to think we'll know what their final budget, including the final county appropriation for the district, will be by early June. Then switching over to the state, it's a long session, so the Senate went first. The Senate released their budget proposal on April 15th, and then the House released their proposal much more recently, May 19th. And all these links in the document, if you access the document electronically, should be hot links and take you directly to the information. And that third link is something that DPI puts together that compares the different budget proposals, and it generally, I believe it includes the governor's proposal as well. So we're just going to go through some highlights of the two, the proposal from the Senate and the House. And at this point, they're different, in some ways very different, in other ways not. But until they reach consensus, it's just keeping an eye on it more than anything. So the Senate proposal favors smaller salary increases, eliminates fewer jobs across the state, has aggressive income tax cuts, and slashes spending more so on higher education, and also has a requirement at the university level to raise tuition. The House proposal favors larger salary increases, although I will just say larger is relative, just relative. It's not large increases, larger. Smaller income tax cuts, some provisions to reinstate the sales tax holiday that had been in place for beginning a year, and it too reduces spending on higher education and does require a tuition increase at the university level. So drilling it down now, the Senate budget for teachers and instructional support will provide a step increase for each staff member, as well as it increases steps. And we're going to look at the schedule in a minute just to give you some examples. And it increases, and again, this is just the state schedule. This does not include the local supplement provided by the district. So it would increase a beginning teacher's pay from state-funded $41,000 a year to $41,510 a year. So I believe that's a $510 per year annual increase. A one-time bonus of $1,500. And there are no changes to the already in place performance bonuses for teachers. The assistant principal compensation in the Senate proposal remains as it currently is, in that they're paid off the teacher schedule, the teacher A0 schedule, but with a 19% pay differential. In the Senate's proposal, that would continue. So the increase here to the teacher schedule would have a 19% differential, and then also a one-time $1,500 bonus. And then for principal, central office, and non-instructional personnel, a 1.25% increase, and a one-time $1,500 bonus. And I'll just note, for the three categories, for all those bonuses, it's one time, it's not recurring. And because it's a bonus, it is not treated towards an employee's retirement compensation. So comparing that to the House proposal, it too provides it increases to each step and a step increase, but a very big difference, it increases starting pay, and again, just state the local supplement's not in these numbers, from $41,000 to $48,000 in 25-20. So big difference there. No change to performance bonuses. Assistant principal will continue to be tied to the teacher salary schedule with a 19% differential, and then principal, central office, and non-instructional personnel a 2.5% increase.
And Mr. Nieder, if I may add, with the House version, their budget does include master's pay,
Yes.
which was a major difference from the Senate version.
Yes, that is correct. So here are just a couple examples, and I know on the screen you probably can't see it, but on what you've got in your laptop, you can expand your screen. And I'm not going to go through this in detail, but on left, this is on the left is the House proposal, excuse me, the Senate proposal, and on the right is the House proposal. And on the Senate proposal, the columns there, the first column, beyond step, is the current state base. The second column is the proposed state base. And again, a teacher who this year, let's say, is on step 0, next year will be on step 1. So they'd be going from a monthly base salary of $4,100 a year to $4,227, because they're getting that step increase, and the step numbers actually changed as well. So that effectively is a 3.1% increase for that step 0 teacher next year becoming a step 1 teacher. So if you go down that column, increase with step, current teachers from step 0 through 13, with the exception of step 5, would all receive at least a 3% increase. And step 5 would be a 2.98%, so almost 3%. But then when you get down to step 15, the increases drop to 1.24%. And again, with the exception of step 25, when there's a 5% increase, but then back to 26, it's flat again with a 1.25% increase. And that is an artifact of those plateaus that are in the base salary schedule for the state. Again, those year-to-year increases do not take into account the local supplement. Those increases with step will look different with the supplement because we've been able to do some work over the years getting differentiation between those plateaued steps with the local supplement, but you still see with that. And we did not include with the local supplement here, knowing that these are going to be moving targets, but as we get closer to it, we'll obviously bring that information to you so you can have a picture of what total teacher compensation would be in Lee County. The House's version, on the right, looking at those same columns, an increase with step, a step 0 teacher. This past year, going to step 1 would receive a 17.68% increase. Going from a state base of $4,100 per year to a state base of $4,825. And those year-over-year increases for the early teachers would remain in the double digits. 16%, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. And then finally by step 8, they get to 9%, 9.37. They still stay above 5% through step 12, and they stay above 3% all the way through step, I believe it's 16, where they drop below 3% for a couple steps, then they're back up, and then they hit a plateau on 26 and they're stuck around 2%. So perhaps not ideal, but if I had to pick one of the two, I think I'd pick this one. So jumping now to the two budgets as it relates to employer benefit rates, and these can have a big impact on the district's budget and its need for local funding. We used in the proposed budget an estimate for increases for both health care and retirement as it relates to the employer contribution. We took a 5-year look back and got an average. That column, board's proposed budget, those are the numbers we used in forecasting the costs of what additional local funding would be needed. A 25.7% retirement contribution rate. And what that means is for every dollar of pay somebody receives, almost 26 cents on top of that dollar has to be spent and given to the retirement system. And $8,419 for hospitalization. Both the Senate and the House have slightly lower numbers, 24.67%. So if the final state legislation is 24.67% in reconciling the board's proposed budget to a final budget and needs, there'd be a little bit of savings there. That's good news. That might be offset, though, because for the hospitalization, both Senate and House include an increase to a fixed dollar amount of $8,500, which is higher than the 5-year trailing average. So there'd be a cost there that's not taken into account in the board's proposed budget. Some additional things just in the two chambers' budgets. The Senate budget does include a 5% reduction to the central office expenditure allotment. That's for personnel. There is a reduction to the at-risk allotment, $7 million statewide. Advanced placement and IB test fees would be reduced. And the fees would now only cover students who are economically disadvantaged. It would no longer cover other fees under the Senate's proposal. The Senate would eliminate funding to cover MSA intern stipends. And the Senate budget proposal would fund an expansion of advanced teaching roles, statewide increase of $17.2 million. The House proposal, as Mr. Swanson said, good news, would restore advanced degree salary supplements statewide, and they provide $8 million of funding for that. A little back of the envelope math that we did though, and granted we only know what this Wake County has. We don't know the density of master's degree teachers in other districts. But I would hypothesize that $8 million may either not cover it statewide. We didn't dive deep enough into the legislation. We would assume it would be retroactive, so all those teachers that have not been grandfathered would be receiving this under the House proposal. I guess a worst case scenario would be this is new teachers going forward, but again, we didn't dig into that at this point because we know it's a moving target. But I just sort of throw out there that number seems a little low if it was going to be for all master's degree teachers in the state that are not grandfathered, that are teaching in a subject area that's aligned with their degree. And last, and you've heard about this, you had some public comment on this at your last meeting. I'm sorry I'm jumping, but I'll cover it. There is funding through DPI to conduct a study into advanced HVAC systems and related, and this is for Wake County, to look at recommendations for across the state, but we would benefit from participating in that. And then jumping up a bullet that I skipped, EC, Exceptional Children, does provide a funding increase to increase that cap from 13% to 13.25%. It's the first time I recall that cap being increased in the entire time I have served here at the district. Dr. Taylor and others probably know more than I do about that. So next steps. At this point, the board is really in a wait-and-see mode and keep our eyes on the ball mode as far as what happens with the county and the county's final budget, and also what happens with the state legislature and their final budget. So as it turns to that, we will ask the board at your second June meeting to adopt an interim budget. We'll give more information about what an interim budget means as we get closer to that, but effectively it allows the board to continue to operate, not doing anything new or expanded, while we are awaiting the final state budget and while we are waiting for information that will allow the superintendent and staff to make final recommendations to reconcile its proposed budget to the final county and state budget. It'll allow the board to operate and the district to operate. So that's really our update. Chair Swanson would be glad to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nieder, and I just want to also thank Ms. Posey, Dr. Mantillo, and Ms. Kimsey for the work that goes into the budget. And although we're in the wait-and-see phase, your team and your staff is already digging into next year's budget. So the budget is a year-round process, and so the work does not stop. So I'll reserve my comments, but I'll go around and see if board members have other comments. Ms. Edmonds?
On slide 16, the Senate budget proposal, the 5% reduction to central office allotment. Are you in a position to say what that would mean for Wake County?
Ms. Edmonds, great question. Assuming that was done on a ADM basis, let's say, or across-the-board basis, Wake County still represents about 10% of the student population over the state. So you can take 10%, about $550,000 would be a reduction. That allotment comes to us, if I'm not mistaken, in dollars. It's not a position allotment, so we would receive basically a dollar value allotment in the area of $500,000. And that is used to fund central office positions.
May I follow up? I just think that's really has a lot of weight to it in a negative way because of the fact that Dr. Taylor and then with our approval of the budget, reduced our central services by almost 40%. And as we've discussed, some of these positions may not be standing directly in front of children daily. They do impact our classrooms in a big way. So that is of great concern to me. There's other things of concern, but just wanted that to make that statement. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Sherry?
Thank you, and thank you for putting all of this together. I think we could dive deeper into the different budget proposals, and I think there are some things that, in some cases, there are specific, there's a very clear funding component, and then in some other things that are included as special provisions in the budget, there's some things that might not have a dollar attached, but could result in either savings for the district or increased costs for the district. So, there's even layers beneath this that we could go. But I do, I think your word said that, neither budget is optimal, but the House budget in particular does include a lot of, very important things that would be beneficial for public education and for Wake County. Finally seeing, however small an increase in the percentage for our special education students, seeing master's pay increase. There's things, I think, depending on what we see in terms of staff pay, where we might be obligated in Wake County to pay more, and that might upset our budget on one end, but we might save some money on the other end if master's pay is restored statewide. So I know that you and your staff will have a lot of work to go. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I wanted to get at this or not, but the county commissioners meet.
Absolutely.
If I can, and I'll defer to you, I do want to say that I thought we received a very good response from the presentations that were given to the county commissioners. And I particularly want to commend our superintendent, Dr. Robert Taylor, and Mr. Nieder for their presentations. Some of these issues are complex issues, and sometimes you've been in the rooms. We talk about things like deferred maintenance and people's eyes start to glaze over. But I thought that it was presented in such a way that really many commissioners got it. And I think the chief concern that I'd been hearing from many county commissioners during this budget session was a concern not just of the amount of the budget, but how we were spending it. And really what their concern was with the responsibility to pick up costs for capital improvement and renovation, a worry that we weren't putting enough into those areas. But I think with Dr. Taylor's presentation in particular, he was able to lay out a plan and summarize all the work that we've been doing over the year, but put it in one nice, directed presentation to kind of give them faith and confidence. And I'll turn it over for you for your observations, but I felt that we came out of that meeting really having done a lot to give them faith and confidence in our plan going forward and the importance of this budget request.
I definitely agree. I think leaving there, I think that presentation did restore the confidence in our commissioners as it relates to to M&O and HVAC, because what we've heard from them quite often was statutorily, they're responsible for brick and mortar. That's it. And they've stood in the gap and whatnot, and so, which we're grateful for, but hearing that M&O update that Dr. Taylor presented that will come to an information item at not this upcoming board member meeting, but a future one, can really explain a better roadmap. And I think it was Commissioner Stallings who requested that it is actually shared publicly, because it really gave them a clear update. So Dr. Taylor, I'll pause and let you share whatever you would like to share about that.
I mean, I think you both said it, that it is a very complex issue, but we were able to explain it in a way that they understood not only the challenge, but really the plan that we have to address that. And I think it gave them a lot of understanding about some misnomers in terms of what they were hearing, why things were the way that they are, ultimately how we've got to look at not only the funding within maintenance and operations, but our entire budget. How we look and evaluate the work that takes place. And so I can tell you that not only did the chair and vice chair get a lot of positive feedback, but I got just as much from commissioners to say, this sealed the deal for us, and we have complete confidence that you guys are on this and working to resolve it. So we're going to continue down that road, but we were really grateful for the feedback that we got. But I think you guys hit it on the head, and so when we come back and share that same information here, because I think you all got the PowerPoint that I shared with them, but me having to go through it, that'll make it even better in terms of the explanation.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Is there any comments? Well, I have one, Mr. Nieder and Dr. Mutillo, that maybe you can help kind of set some context around. I know we have, I think it's the previous slide on, as it talked about the Senate's proposed budget, which eliminating the funds to cover MSA intern stipends. How do you see that impacting, if this version was to move forward, how will that impact, our staff as we have teachers who are trying to become future APs? How will that impact the work and the recruitment process?
From what I know of just seeing it in the budget, it will absolutely impact it, because a lot of these folks, they are receiving a stipend to do the internship, but it looks like they are also going to remove the internship requirement. There are folks that we are approving now for fall to start their internship, so I think we need to get some clarity on what that impact will be. Certainly the opportunity to spend a year learning as a principal prior to being thrown into the role, I think absolutely hurts the development of future administrators. That time is critical, and for the folks who are receiving these stipends, that's exactly what it is. I mean, they are stepping away from other teaching responsibilities to walk side by side with principals and assistant principals to learn. So it definitely will have an impact on real estate development.
Mr. Chair, I'll tell you that this is ultimately returning to a process that we had over 20 years ago. And really what that was, you were a classroom teacher, and you went out and did bus supervise at a ball game or something like that, and you really did not have a quality internship experience. And so it is returning to what it was, seems like 2 decades ago. And their intern, you see, they took away the 500-hour requirement as well. But the best thing that we've had done was to allow anybody who's involved in an internship to do it full time and get paid for it. That is truly the only way that you really understand the job. And so, we obviously, as superintendents and school districts, are concerned about this. This was one area I think completely took me by surprise, and I just hope they know the impact of what this can do. It's really bad.
Dr. Taylor, I'm wondering, would it be helpful for our Division of Principals and APs to either write to the state senators to let them know the impact that they're going to face firsthand? I know we can talk about it, but I think oftentimes I found it to be a little bit more helpful when you have folks that are actually doing the work, that a senator can look at them and say, this is a perspective that I didn't really think through. So that may be something we can do in the future. But
absolutely, I'll reach out to the division, but I'm also looking to hear from NC Pampa, Dr. Shirley Prince, and NCASA, Dr. Catherine Joyce. Again, I don't know if they knew this was coming out. They're usually really on top of these things, so it may have been something that they held real close, and even they found it at the last minute. But we've got to circle wagons on this one.
Are there any additional comments or questions? Dr. Reed?
I just thank you guys for putting the comparison together. It really helps to, have a better look at it. And I just think that just continue the advocacy to our legislators. I think the House proposal is kind of a testament to the bipartisan approach. Some of the things that we've been talking about at this table has really resonated more on the House side. And I think it has to do with the bipartisan nature of our representation here in Wake County. So maybe more of a focus on the Senate side is needed to get them on board, to try to see it the House's way.
To your point, you remember when we met with them as a delegation, how many representatives were there, but how few senators. Yeah.
To the senators' credit, I guess, they had session.
They had been in session, but when it was over, they just went home.
Right. I think that is a great piece. I will also say the work of our lobbyists being, in constant communication with staff, and with that, it's also helped us move the needle. So, again, no budget is perfect, but if I can throw my support behind a budget, it will definitely be the House budget, in hopes that we can figure out how they move forward from there. And so, thankful for the work that we've done, and, again, our work still continues with our passing of our interim budget, not at this meeting, but the next meeting. And then it's the wait and see phase, as Mr. Nieder has pointed out, to see what the House and Senate comes up with. And then we will pass our final budget. Hopefully it won't be as late in the fall as we've seen, but relatively soon. Are there any other comments? Ms. Caulfield?
I think it's important to address kind of what you just said, but the fact that those conversations have, and breaking it down, the reasons why and the impact it has, really makes a difference. And I think, us being able to meet with House more and actually explaining a lot of this, we did see results from it. So I think that communication of how it impacts us, what we can see, and giving them specifics of what we need to see makes a big difference.
And advocacy continues. Dr. Taylor?
And so I'll just end with, first of all, thanking the staff for the work that they've done. And I do want to say that I hope the community appreciates the transparency of the board that we've done. You all as a board have done a tremendous amount to give people an opportunity to give feedback on multiple occasions. And we certainly will pay even closer attention to vernacular and the words that we say and how we explain something, and not just necessarily take it for granted that someone knows what you're talking about. But for me, every year is about creating more and more transparency, and I'm convinced that when people know what I know, they don't land too far from where I am. And I'll end with, as a board, it is absolutely your responsibility to make those changes. And I have to remind people that it is the board's budget that goes to the commissioners, not the superintendent's budget. And so I appreciate the work that we've been able to do together, but we know we've still got a ways to go, so we'll get there.
That's very true. And this will be our last meeting for this academic school year. Let me clarify. When I mean this academic school year, I mean May, June, July we will not meet, but we will kick back at the start of August. By then we should hopefully see where the House and Senate is, and then also kind of exploring some deeper topics that was into the budget. Like we've heard from Title I, really digging into that. I'll get with Facilities Chair Hershey to talk about some of the CIP of how we can bring some of that work through this committee in the future. So we'll be throwing some topics around, and so with that, I will call our May meeting adjourned at 3:52.